Brian. Going here. Brian Smith.
Present.
Esther Keith. Franco Castro-Marin.
Present.
Garth Gamer.
Present.
Heather Miller. Present. Jason Johnson. Josh Gaither.
Here.
Mark Hansen.
Here.
Matt Shaw.
Present.
Paul Dabrowski. Philip
Here.
Hannon.
Here.
All right, I got Paul and Philip. Sorry, Brand. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and have a look at the attendance report. That's attachment 3A. Friendly reminder that if you've missed 2 consecutive meetings, the Bureau will contact you to ask you if you're still interested in serving on the committee. And at this time, there are no vacancies to report for PMD. And with that, I'll pass it along to the Department Updates Bureau report, please.
Good afternoon, Dr. Castro-Marin. I have some updates to share from Department of Health Services, and I will do my best to go through these slides quickly, especially for so many of the folks that have listened to this report more than once today. We have a shout out to give in the next couple slides. If you go ahead to slide, the next one. We want to let folks know that we just received our appropriation for this fiscal year. And we want to thank our regional councils that have taken on some additional funding in the amount of about $850,000. We were able to work with the 4 regional councils to dedicate some funding toward rural paramedic education. We really appreciate being able to work with the councils on this. And this is a shout out again to all of the folks that contribute to Arizona's EMS and trauma system. We have over 21,000 EMCTs in the state of Arizona now, with just over 8,000 paramedics, I think, on the next slide listed. Moving ahead to the next slide. We want to thank all the providers that are currently reporting to AV Peers. We're approaching 170 agencies that report data on close to real-time basis to the Arizona Prehospital Information and EMS Registry System, AV Peers. There are well over 100 agencies that have migrated to BEMSTS version 3.5. This has been a big initiative for the department, and we know it's a big lift. We are so appreciative. AV Peers is the place we go to collect patient care information, and when used in aggregate, we all know that we're able to use this to make recommendations to improve patient care and outcomes statewide. So can't thank everyone enough. We have 2 pages of agencies listed here just to give them a shout out. Next couple slides are on National Registry, the SHARE program, and naloxone Leave Behind. In the interest of time, Dr. Bradley, would you like to talk about SHARE and or naloxone Leave Behind?
Sure, I will cover those briefly for those of you who weren't at the last 2 meetings. In regards to SHARE, just a reminder to everyone that the Bureau did take over the data component from the University of Arizona effective July 1st. From the EMS agency perspective, there's really no change. Your data will continue to go into AD Peers, and that's where we get the EMS data. The only change will be on the hospital side. The hospital data that is in the process of getting migrated from the University of Arizona to the Bureau. Moving forward, Julia Benton and Adam Rodriguez will be the points of contact for any questions related to SHARE. We are looking forward to our continued partnership with the University of Arizona as we continue to build out the SHARE program moving forward. Next slide, please. The next is a naloxone Leave Behind program. I've mentioned this previously. This is part of our FR Care SAMHSA grant. We are at a point where we are just about ready to go live with this. The training is up and available, And we have several agencies throughout the state that have already implemented this. The training is in a learning management system. So if your agency would like to participate in the grant, please contact Sebastian Thomas. His contact information is on the slide, and you will put that in the chat as well. You can then enroll your agency in the training. The training will get uploaded by you into whatever learning management system you use. Once 80% of your personnel are trained, we will then send you the naloxone leave behind kit. The kits contain a few items. One is the actual naloxone dosing. The next two items are resource guides. One is a resource guide on how to identify an overdose and how to administer the naloxone. And then the third one is resource guides for patients with substance use disorder, specific to your geographic portion of the state. The last piece we are waiting for before the kits do get distributed will be a QR code sticker that will go on the outside of the kit. This is to allow to gather the data we need for agencies who are implementing this program. When the kit is handed out in the community, we can ask that the personnel scan the QR code, and we'll select 1 to 2 data elements at most to ensure that we have some data on the distribution of this throughout the state. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley and Sebastian. I have a few more plugs, and then I promise I will hand it back to Dr. Castro Marin. We have in the next couple slides a link to our updated EMS and trauma dashboard that's available on the department's website. I think our shortcut link is ezhealth.gov/BEMS. We love this dashboard because it has a high-level overview of the EMS and trauma system, and so many helpful tidbits. You can drill down by region. You can also see some information at the county level at this point. So please check it out. Let us know what you think, and we look forward to continuing to build out these dashboards to provide helpful planning information statewide. In the next slide, we wanted to remind folks that we are seeking feedback from trauma centers to help improve the Arizona Trauma Registry system. The department is planning to go out to bid and officially start an RFP process for a trauma registry at the end of September. We'll be seeking input from the State Trauma Advisory Board as well as trauma center leadership throughout the state. That survey link is available for everyone to access, and we look forward to getting your feedback on how we can smooth the transition and make sure that we are incorporating all the best features in that RFP process moving forward. In the final slide, we just want to plug the EMS and trauma strategic plan that the department is working on. This is a statutory requirement that we are working on with the 4 regional EMS councils. And in the next slide, we just wanted to make sure folks know the process. In the coming months, on the heels of several surveys that have been conducted statewide and thousands of respondents at this point, we will be working on going to each of the regions and conducting focus groups and meetings with stakeholders. We look forward to getting your feedback to be able to incorporate into the 2025 to 2030 strategic plan. It feels funny to say 2030 out loud, but we look forward to that process, and we thank everyone for your feedback. I will pass it back to you, Dr. Castro Marin.
Thank you so much. Very exciting stuff. In section 5 here, item A, I'm asking for a motion to discuss, amend, and approve the draft minutes from March 16th.
So moved.
First
Thank
from
you.
Josh.
Any discussion or amendments? Any opposed? Any opposed, please? All of those approving? Say aye.
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 All right, the motion carries. Item B is we need a motion to discuss and then approve adding antifungals to table 3, both table 3A, which would be for administration and monitoring during interfacility transport, and table 3B, which would be administration and monitoring in a hospital setting, and that's attachment 5B. Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I mean, Amber Franco.
Seconded.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion?
Did you guys want to speak to it?
Sure. Can we combine or are we just doing the antifungals?
I think each individual.
Okay. So, hi, Josh Seidler. So, working with interfacility transport agencies, we've come across a number of drugs that we would like to add to Table 3 so that these could turn into interfacility transports. Currently, these drugs require nurse transports, which further delays interfacility transport times and is really not in the patient's or in the system's best interest. So we ask that this committee consider adding antifungals to Table 3.
And one clarification point, so the two portions of Table 3, a question that Marissa brought forward to me between some of the meeting. So 3A is interfacility, 3B is specific to hospitals, so two very different practice settings. Just want to make sure the group is that there's when we're talking about adding something to Table 3, we need to specify which portion, if not both, we're looking to add that to.
Yeah, in my research, I've looked at some other state protocols. A lot of times, other states refer to anti-infective agents, which kind of include the antibiotics, the antivirals, and antifungals. Currently, we just have antibiotics on our state table, which is why we brought this forward.
Mhm. That is a great point. And certainly for simplicity's sake, I would support a friendly amendment to address that as well as the next item, if that would be within reason for parliamentary structure to change that language to anti-infectives to cover all three.
Can I ask one clarifying question? On here, it lists for antibiotics, administration for EMTIs and paramedics. Would that be the same? It's not reflected in here.
There are 9 EMTIs in the state of Arizona. We do not know if any of them are currently working and if they're using that level. So that's something we will find that out with the admission system. But as of right now, there are 9 EMTIs in the state. So.
Okay, it doesn't take a whole lot for me to include it under one, but not both, if we already have antibiotics under both. I know there aren't very many, so it's probably super relevant.
But if you have if you change that all to anti-infectives, then we'll have to address it somehow here, whether we keep it in for that general class or whether it goes away.
Maybe reveal my.
Sorry, Brian, could you repeat?
So if we combine those 3 into anti-infective, then we're going to have to address the EMTI issues for that general classifications, which is fine with me, but
Mhm.
This may just be my ignorance. I usually hear antimicrobials instead of anti-infective. There like a specific definition of difference between those two.
No.
Yeah, that question, John.
I had a question, and maybe I'm ignorant. Are there antifungals or antivirals that need to be infused over a prolonged period of time?
I mean, I think for certain situations, you can put on a review for, but not more than antibiotic. I mean, it needs to be similar. But if we're including the antibiotic, then we wouldn't include the others.
I've never transferred a patient who needed a drip of valcyclovir during their transport or a drip of
Or any antibiotic, really.
anything.
So can I address, so what we're finding is we are getting these calls, and when the hospitals are calling in, they're labeling them antibiotics. The providers getting there at the paramedic level to transport the call, they think antibiotic because of course paramedic programs don't go into antimicrobial in depth in their differences and all of the names of them. So unless you're a provider that's into knowing all of the drugs, you don't really differentiate when somebody says an antibiotic. So what I find is then I get, when the chart goes to pre-billing, it then comes back as an out of scope because it's not labeled as an antibiotic, it's under a nurse transport drug. And that's part of the reason, as well as response times for this, is because we are finding it probably 2 to 3 times a month.
I think that speaks to the people transporting medication because they don't know what they are and don't trade. So I guess to me, then that kind of identifies a bigger issue.
That is my major concern with this antimicrobial classification. I mean, none of us in this room can list off 5 most common antifungal or the 5 most common antiviral. I can't do that as a doctor. I know very few paramedics who could do that on an interdisciplinary transport list. I think we've hit a very, very slippery slope where we're asking medical directors, people like me, to be responsible for teaching paramedics who do interdisciplinary transport things that I don't do, quite frankly. So I would question, I think if there's a need beyond billing for patient care that we're missing, then maybe this is something we can consider. But the risk is putting a paramedic in a place that they're transporting a patient on a drug they've never heard of for a condition they're not familiar with. And adverse events are going to be rare, but if they happen, it's going to be my liability as the medical director for failing to train the paramedic on how to use that medication. So I think I'm a little hesitant.
I would add in, remember that these are drugs that are not initiated by the paramedics. These are initiated within the system that they're coming from. I am not sure of the time frame for administration for all of the antivirals and antifungals, but there may be some that require an hour or 2 to infuse, and we would hate to delay their final destination based upon these medications. I agree. I mean, they're not things that we use frequently, but I think that when we do, and with the system problems that we have now, I think that adding some of these things in can make our lives simpler on the back end.
We have a couple of hand raised online. Erin?
Hi, yes, it's Erin O'Connor. I was just going to comment and follow up to a comment made. Really with antifungals, things like amphotericin B, which usually does have to be infused over several hours and is associated with significant infusion-related reactions, or can be, and often requires pre-medication. I mean, if that's what they're wanting to send the patient on, I think those transporting the patient should be knowledgeable about amphotericin B. I mean, there may be others, but that's the one that came to mind that has significant infusion time and possible reactions that should be, at least people should be aware of if we're going to have them transporting with it.
Go ahead, Matt.
I feel like one of the comments previously was saying that the EMTALA paperwork was marking it as an antibiotic when in fact it was something different, and the paramedic maybe wasn't picking that up. And I'm wondering, is the onus not on the facility to make sure that they're marking the correct class of medication so that the correct provider is showing up? And then my second question, I suppose, to Dr. O'Connor's point that she just made, was that what is the likelihood of reactions that would be taking place administering some of these medications that would occur potentially en route 20, 30 minutes, an hour into the transport that paramedics would need to be aware of?
So in terms of some of the antifungal agent infusion reactions, I mean, a lot of these things are fairly common and things that could happen with many different classes of medications, but they often involve things like cytokine release, et cetera, fever, chills, vomiting, headaches. Obviously, allergic reactions have to be thrown in there. The question I have, and this echoes the comments of Dr. Gaither, because this does raise the specter of significant training burden. is what is the impact of doubling down on the sending facilities decision-making to decide whether or not these particular therapies can be paused so that they can continue using an ALS interfacility service line or a level of service rather than having to wait for an RN level of service. Does anybody have any additional feedback or comment before we go to a vote?
This is
All right.
Erin again.
Then go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I can't envision a patient care situation in which a patient could be, septic and being covered by these agents, and interrupting the treatment would be, disadvantageous to the patient. So it would not want to be interrupted. But I guess in that case, if the patient's that sick, then they're going to need the higher level of care transport anyway. So I think, I guess I just wanted to offer that comment.
Thank you. Well, I'll withdraw my suggestion of an amendment to couple this all, just to keep things simple, to couple this all under name change to anti-infective or antimicrobial, and we'll keep it to the proposed action item as listed on the agenda of antifungals. If anybody doesn't have any further discussion or commentary, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. So the motion is to approve adding antifungals to table 3, specifically 3A, which is interfacility transport, and 3B, which is hospital setting use for paramedic level of care. Shall we take it to a roll call, Shelley? Would that make more sense for a better count?
Yeah.
All right, Shelley, can I clarify?
Yeah, are you voting on?
Are we doing 3A and 3B, or just 3A?
We're, the motion is to approve adding antifungal to table 3A and 3B.
We're doing them together? Just wanted to clarify.
And I'll do a roll call vote.
Sorry, can I ask a question? I'm just curious if it would be beneficial to split them. Perhaps there's some folks that would feel more comfortable having them administered in hospital when that patient's going to be monitored for hours in the ED as an example versus in an interfacility.
I was going to make the same recommendation. Thank you.
I just wanted to put in there is that the 3B table though also covers the hospital at home job, correct? So to speak, if you're just speaking to that point of being in hospital, that's not necessarily the case.
I'm sorry, could that be repeated, please? I don't think I followed.
So table 3B also includes the hospital at home medics. So they're actually administering the medications not in a facility, they're at the patient's home. So if the reasoning is that at the hospital setting is what you're using as your safety net, the hospital is not there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the 3B, because that's inclusive of that group.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, so we'll go ahead and start a roll call vote.
We're not splitting everything.
I can split.
We're gonna do 2A first.
You approve adding antifungals to 3A. You approve adding antifungal to 3B. Erin, do you, Dr. O'Connor, do you approve adding antifungal to 3A?
That's for intra-hospital transport, correct?
Correct.
No.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B, which is hospital?
No.
Brian Smith, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A?
No.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B?
No.
Chester's not here. Dr. Castro Moran, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A?
No.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B?
No.
Dr. Gamer, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A, which is interfertility?
Approve.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B, which is hospital setting?
Abstain on that one. Don't know enough about it.
All right. Heather Miller, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A?
No.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B?
I'm with Dr. Gamer. I abstain. I don't know a lot about what they want to do with it.
Dr. Gaither,
No and no.
Mark Hansen, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A?
No.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B?
Same, like, not as familiar, so I'm gonna abstain on that.
Okay. Yeah, so do you approve adding antifungals to 3A
No.
and 3B?
Abstain.
Paul Dabrowski, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A?
Yes.
Do you approve adding antifungals to 3B?
No.
Dr. Hannon, do you approve adding antifungals to 3A?
No to both.
Both no. Okay, sure. Dr. Brand,
No.
the 3A and 3B. The motion to approve does not carry.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the next item, which is to discuss, amend, and approve adding antiviral therapies, again, to table 3A and 3B. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. So obviously, this is dovetailing on to the same arguments as the first one. Probably I'll anticipate that it again is going to come down to the same counter arguments of the training hurdles, resource limitations that go into that, coupled with any concerns with threats to adverse reactions. My sense of it is, at least in my practice, please correct me if I'm wrong, but aside from things like, again, some fever, chills, and allergy, I don't know that these are particularly more higher threat of toxicity in the hours during and after infusion compared to antifungals. Any comments there?
This is Erin O'Connor. I'll just comment that, it's a tough class in general. I would agree with the fact that traditional antivirals don't typically have an adverse toxicity profile, such as like acyclovir or valcyclovir, that would raise concern for me. The issue is that now you have the monoclonal antibodies that would be classified as antivirals. So that becomes a little bit stickier. And I don't know if that's what was intended by adding this. Was it because of monoclonal antibodies, or was it because of things like valcyclovir and acyclovir?
I think this was more of the traditional antivirals that we come across in the interfacility transport world.
Which are typically rather benign and wouldn't raise much concern. I just think now that we have this category that encompasses monoclonal antibodies, something needs to be, we need further definition on whether those are included or excluded, I guess.
Are those considered?
Is there any
antivirals?
desire from,
What's the question?
I'm not, I don't think of those in the antiviral term as far as the immunologic agents. I don't know a better way to clarify antivirals.
well, one option is to simply name the, amend this motion to simplify it to specifically acyclovir, valacyclovir, as opposed to using the catch-all term antiviral, so that there's less confusion.
Yeah, I mean, you may want to include things like ribavirin or some of these other antiviral medications as well.
Okay.
Might be events.
I mean, really, it was COVID that led to monoclonal antibodies being used as an antiviral. Right prior to COVID, we didn't really have such a thing. So, remdesivir is obviously not a monoclonal, but there's several for influenza. But a lot of the MABs now are obsolete in the sense that they no longer work against COVID. So maybe I just raised the point. It could be something that you could just say excluding monoclonal antibodies for future
Okay.
pandemics or epidemics.
Aaron, are there any of the sort of typical antivirals that would have an extended infusion time that would?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'm certainly not an antimicrobial expert, but I think they're all pretty short IV infusions. I'd have to go looking through some guidelines to confirm that, but generally acyclovir, valacyclovir, those types of things do not require prolonged infusions. And then remdesivir, what was it? Does anybody remember? You'd think I'd know these things, but I've blocked it.
I'm looking it up.
I still think the remdesivir is short. The infusion time is still short. That was the only one. But yeah, so I don't think there would be many by any means.
Dr. Gamer has his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this is a solution in search of a problem, and I believe is Dr. Zeidler there in person?
Yeah.
Do you think that this needlessly delays interfacility transport sometimes while you're searching out a nurse car to effect such transport? Is this a frequent occurrence?
Yeah, so it seems common sense that you could stop an infusion or finish the infusion prior, but what's happening is they're calling for the transport, they're saying this is going, and then what that automatically disqualifies them from the paramedic ambulance, then they're in line for a nurse ambulance, and that maybe takes 4 or 5 hours, and nobody puts the thoughts together. So there's really an internal issue between the interfacilities and the dispatch centers and trying to clarify. So that was the intent, was to make everything simpler.
Definitely, there's an opportunity to maybe for the dispatch centers to work with the hospitals when they're calling and they specify those drugs to provide that education of.
Or specified on the
Right.
PCR form that you're filling out that these include antibiotic, exclude.
And we are trying that, but not every facility wants to hear from a dispatcher about what they can or can't do, and some doctors are not open to suggestions.
I do think that, from the onus on the medical director for that EMS provider to provide the education and have the knowledge and training on that. So just pointing out that most members on this committee are looking at these specific drugs to figure out what the timeframes are for infusions. So, just realizing that the physicians are providing the medical direction to the paramedics.
If something does happen en route, that are calling for medical direction.
My quick Google search says it ranges from an hour to 6 hours. 22. Most of them are over an hour. Some of the COVID antivirals, 4 hours.
Any other comments? let's see if we can try this as a standard vote to save us a little bit of time here. All those opposed to adding antivirals to table 3A and 3B, please acknowledge.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Was that real clear?
And
I
all,
captured like Brian. Did I capture you?
Sure.
No.
You
In
have
the
to have the
room?
post, right?
No.
All those
Dr.
opposed.
No.
Heather Miller's a no.
Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Hammond, no.
Get it right, Bobby.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye to both.
Shelley, are you comfortable with that vote?
Yeah, it sounds like the motion failed.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for that discussion. Next, if I can have a motion to discuss, amend, approve, adding octreotide again to both tables 3A and 3B. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a hand raised in the room.
So
Brian,
octreotide,
sorry, Dr. Kesselman, we have a hand raised in the room. Go ahead, Brian.
Is there a way we could move the profile up first to discuss, because the indications that are on the profile don't really match what I see when people are having to turn down transports for octreotide. It's upper GI bleed, so they're getting it for. And right now that's not on the profile, so.
I'll withdraw my
Yeah.
second.
yeah. So as a matter of clarification, I agree with Brian's well-made point. The indication that I would recognize for bringing this up for discussion is certainly individual or individuals who are suggesting this can speak to this, but it would be for an infusion in the setting of managing a patient with active upper GI bleed, typically from variceal bleeds. But that actually is another action item lower down to look at that specific drug profile. And so perhaps for the sake of time, if we could just acknowledge that GI bleed is the actual indication and then stick to the motion at hand, which is to either do an up or down vote. Is that agreeable to everyone? If it's not approved, then we can.
Does that exclude sulfonylurea overdoses?
Just to clarify, if the drug is approved, what's written on the profile isn't 100% pertinent, right? Because the medical director can elect to use that drug or approve it for whatever use they want. So really, it's approving the drug, and the profile is somewhat like an information piece, but isn't 100%, like the only thing that it can be used for.
Limited, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Correct. And like I said, the drug profile discussion is listed as a later action item anyway. And so we can, assuming this motion carries, we can certainly come back to that.
I'll reinstall my second.
Is there anyone who present who wants to speak to the motion itself?
Is it up for discussion?
The justification, et cetera?
Sorry. Hey, Josh Slider again. So once again, I'd like to bring up, octreotide is a continuous infusion in a lot of places. GI specialists are rare and sometimes hard to find, and there are a lot of interfacility transfers that are requested that are receiving continuous infusion of IV octreotide. AMR numbers show that we had 111 nurse transports for this call. And so I would once again like to bring this up in order to, I think it's a relatively safe drug during infusion. The infusion is previously started and not initiated by the paramedic. And this proposed that this would be allowed within table 3.
Any further comments?
It is an emergency drug.
Yeah, I know. I've got a couple of facilities that use it fairly often, and they're having to turn down the transports on people that certainly should be able to do a ground transport with the paramedics. So
I think the big side effects are either longer term or like the hypoglycemia that they should be able to monitor and treat it where that they're already versed in.
Most of them are enough that we don't see it over and over again. Less of a training issue.
Just a roll call vote.
Yeah, no, I think I did.
Sure. Sure. If there's no other comments,
Sorry, was
we can,
I feel
we
like
can do a roll call
maybe-
vote, Shelley, if that'll be.
I feel like maybe octreotide was up for discussion previously, and I just can't quite remember. And I'm wondering if anyone remembers that to be true or why it wasn't passed last time.
I don't think we've ever talked about it before. I've had a outline position who want me to bring it, and it's like bring literature, so I didn't end up bringing it. So I don't remember it ever being on here for any other meeting.
I remember when we added some Toprazole. I remember that.
They tend to be sicker patients, and that's kind of more of an argument for expeditious transport in my mind. So.
All right, I'll do roll call vote. Amber, do you approve adding octreotide to table 3A and 3B? Yes. Dr. O'Connor, do you approve adding octreotide to table 3A and 3B?
Yes, I do.
Brian Smith,
Yes.
Bronco Castamarette? Do you approve
Yes.
adding octreotide to 3A and 3B?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Dr. Gamer, do you approve?
Yes to both.
Heather Miller, do you approve?
Yes to both.
Dr. Gaither?
Yes.
Mark Hansen?
Yes.
Matt Shaw?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrowski?
Yes.
Dr. Tannen?
There.
Dr. Brand?
Yes.
Philip Hansen, do you approve adding octreotide to table 3A and 3B?
Yes.
The motion passes. It's a first to add.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Next, if I could get a motion, please, to discuss, amend, and approve adding acetylcysteine. Now, this one, please note, the motion is at least listed on the agenda as adding to table 3A only. May I have a motion?
Can I make a motion that we look at adding that to 3A and 3B?
You can amend.
We can add that as a friendly,
I'm making it-
friendly amendment.
I'm making that motion.
Okay, the motion is to add acetylcysteine to 3A and 3B. Is there a second? Second.
Oh, yeah.
Did we hear a second?
Yes, Amber.
Thank you. All right, so the motion is amended to add this item to both table 3A and 3B. Any discussion there?
I think similar to octreotide, it's one that almost always a fairly extended infusion. Fairly low side effect profile, though. I would not have an issue adding.
Yeah, I would just, thank you. I would just say that, AMR had at least 62 nurse transports for this over the last year. And once again, this delays patient care. So by adding it to the paramedic scope of practice for table 3 would be a great help.
This is Aaron O'Connor. I'll say
Any edit?
I definitely, the inter-hospital transport, inter-facility transport, 100% support in the sense that, and also, the risk of N-acetylcysteine comes in the first hour of infusion, typically at the higher rates of infusion. So anaphylactoid reactions have occurred, and actually deaths from N-acetylcysteine can occur, usually when they rapid infusion of the entire 24 hours, bag. So there have been incidents in which N-acetylcysteine has proven to be dangerous and or fatal. The main issue is largely it is safe, and the first hour of the bolus infusion is the problematic time where they should be monitored, should have cardiac monitoring during that bolus infusion. So we would want it to be on the lower dose infusions that they could be transported. And the only reason that I bring this discussion up is because then you've added the 3B, and then someone implied that the 3B meant that paramedics may not be in a hospital setting actually, and maybe in a home hospital setting. So that's the only reason that distinguishing 3A and 3B might be relevant, I guess.
Any other comments?
And I think just to kind of clarify, as Dr. O'Connor pointed out, anything that's on 3B means any hospital setting. So it does exclude both the hospital at home program, although it'd be unlikely, it still would be possible. So once the thing is approved on a drug table, it can't be used with medical director approval in that setting. So just kind of a reminder from the interfacility piece, through this patient moving from one setting to another, that likely that initial hour is being completed prior to the transfer anyhow. The hospital setting, they may not have that initial hour completed as part of that monitoring component.
Erin, can I just ask you a quick question, Sherry? For now, the anaphylactic reactions typically are from IV, not from inhaled,
Somebody cut
correct?
out. I'm sorry, you cut out there. Did what?
The anaphylactic reactions are IV nucleus or IV acetylcysteine, not the inhaled, correct?
That is correct. Anaphylactoid and anaphylactic reactions are from the IV infusion of N-acetylcysteine. I can't imagine, is there really suspicion that we're transporting folks with inhaled mucomist?
No, not the transport side, but if they're using it in a hospital type setting or even a hospital at home, I can potentially foresee somebody saying, well, we can give them that for these, really bad bronchitis in some of these patients that they want to break up some mucus, where that would be less concerning in a non-hospital setting. So I don't know if that can be, I don't know how that part works once you've okayed it. Yeah, that's why I wanted to just put that out there. Once the drug is approved, it is in whatever method.
Yeah, I will definitely say nebulized mucomist or N-acetylcysteine is 100% benign, and there is no risk of anaphylactoid reaction necessarily with that particular. So just speaking about IV N-acetylcysteine. Now, as a toxicologist, I am 100% in favor of continuing the infusion of N-acetylcysteine when transporting to a hospital, because that's been, we've seen catastrophic, late presenting acetaminophen who initially got treated, and then paramedics had, transport interrupted that treatment to transport them to, a tertiary care center, which is really, really to the patient's disadvantage. So want to be clear that keeping it going during transport is important. And after the bolus, and after you've gotten a first load of the higher dose, if you have not have an anaphylactoid reaction, it is typically otherwise very well tolerated and very benign.
Go ahead, Dr. Gamer.
Well, given the last few comments, I believe it was Brian Smith that asked that it be considered not just for 3A, but for 3B. Can you elaborate on why you want it for the hospital setting, Brian?
Well, because they have the ability to be able to monitor that in the hospital. I mean, we're adding all kinds of stuff to the paramedic scope of practice in the hospital. So, you know, I didn't realize that transferred out to houses this whole time. So I've apparently been very confused on that topic. So that might make a difference now that I understand that it's included in. Yeah, but I guess so you have a bolus and then there's a maintenance infusion. Is that correct? Can we call it a maintenance infusion? Can we add that to, add it to the description in their maintenance infusion only? And that way they, at least for the interfacility part for the moment, they would have to get the bolus out of the way before they can transfer the patient.
I think that would be an outstanding recommendation. Like I said, honestly, you know, cardiovascular monitoring in a setting is required for that first hour of infusion, and then once it's on a maintenance infusion. Now, I will say that there is the issue if you go from a 4-hour to then the 16-hour. Either one of those should be well tolerated. So I think if we just say maintenance infusion, that might get around the issue.
You know, we don't have any of those.
If I could make a
types of-
suggestion.
Just a second, Bronco. My only concern is I don't know, we have to get the rule writers to weigh in on if we can put that type of verbiage on the drug table because we don't have that for anything else. And typically the need is being interpreted as the drug as it is approved.
It doesn't sound like the interfacility transport crews would really ever have a reason to initiate this medication. And but I don't know that it's necessary to clarify. I think I would be fine without the clarification on there. And I think it makes it more challenging if you're including it like that on 3B, because in the hospital setting, they would often be initiating medication, not just medication.
And can I comment really quick on the EKG monitoring? Our providers would be required to continue cardiac monitoring for the duration of the transport that they were on this drug, just like any of the higher level drugs on the table currently.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like in my experience, patients that are receiving the acetylcysteine are usually pretty sick. And so having a nurse or a flight crew transporting them, especially in the early stages, seems like that would probably be more appropriate than sticking a lone paramedic in the back.
Actually, there's a lot of very not sick acetaminophen that have to be transported. So, you know, ideally, yeah. So especially in the early stages when we're talking about the point of issue, I guess, is that it's the early presenters who aren't sick, who are getting started on the drug, and they may never get sick, but they still get transported. So there is a mixed population there. Certainly the already late presenting hepatic failure patients are going to be a much different story.
Yeah, in my experience with their interfacility, it's mainly the significant overdose that presents early that then is being transferred to a more suitable destination facility, whether that be a toxicology center or a place that's more fitted for the patient's age.
Would it be appropriate to amend that motion to table this and check with the rule writers until next time?
I think what Amber was saying, she didn't feel that's verbiage is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it would be necessary.
I mean, the referring physician should not be sending, I mean, anybody who's loading somebody with an acetylcysteine should be aware that that first hour is the point of concern that they need to be monitored during. So I can't imagine, well, the physician arranging the transfer should not be sending the patient till the infusion's in anyway. And then, you know, otherwise.
And we can use that on the education side for educating our paramedics that, you know, the first hour is the most critical, and make sure that they note that the initiation of that infusion, are they within that first hour period, and provide a lot of that stuff on the education side as well.
I have a question for Dr. Bradley from the background's sake, since it seems like it's produced a little bit of confusion for members of this panel. The Arizona acute care at home, has that evolved past the 2021 pilot program status currently?
The BMS pilot program that was approved, and then the legislator, approved has been extended.
I want to say 27, but I'm not.
Yeah, at least through 2025, if not further. It's still considered a pilot program, from CMS, but the legislation that approves that, coincides with this.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion on acetylcysteine? Again, to remind the panel, the motion was amended to add this medication to table 3A and 3B. Any further discussion before we move to a vote? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of adding N-acetylcysteine to table 3A and 3B, say aye.
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 I think they wanted to
Any
split that.
opposed, say
Bronco.
nay.
Yes,
Bronco.
point of,
Okay.
can we split the vote? Because
Yes,
I'm
split.
going to have two different votes.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, my
Okay.
apologies. I wasn't tracking that. Okay, Shelley, go ahead, please.
Dr. Rice, do you approve the drug for table 3A and 3B? Connor, do you approve the drugs for table 3A
Yes.
and 3B?
Yes.
Brian Smith, do you approve the drug for table 3A
Yes.
and 3B?
No.
Dr. Kaplan, do you approve the drugs for table 3A?
I'm a yes to both, please.
Okay. Dr. Gamer, do you approve the drug for 3A,
Yes.
3B?
No.
Heather Miller, do you approve the drug for 3A,
Yes.
3B?
Yes.
Dr. Gazer,
Yes, yes.
Mark Hansen, do you approve the drug for table 3A? You still on? Mark Hansen?
Keep going. We got to put the agenda.
Matt Shaw, you
I'm a
approve the drug?
yes and a no.
Dr. Dabrowski, do you approve 3A?
Yes and yes.
Dr. Hannon, do you approve 3A?
Yes to both.
And Dr. Brandt?
Yes and yes.
The motion passes approved to add the 3A and 3B.
And just to point out, Shelley, for a point of clarification, Dr. O'Connor is pointing out correctly that the name of this drug should be listed as N-acetylcysteine.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear. Can you share the outcome of the vote?
Yes. The majority were yeses to vote, so the motion is approved and drug will be added to both 3A and 3B with no qualifiers.
Okay. And so now if we could go to item F, which is to discuss and then approve the draft drug profile for octreotide. This is attachment 5F. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Brian and Amber.
Open for discussion.
The indentation needs to include proper GIG, proper GIG.
Yes,
The
Shelley, I
copy
would
shown in
recommend that
statics.
to the,
I'm sorry, what is shown is static, but I'm making notes on a paper copy to add upper GI bleeds.
okay, thank you. As an indication, correct. And then under pharmacological action, that it helps reduce GI bleeding through its effect on the splanchnic vasculature.
It's also used in hypoglycemia from sulfonylurea overdose.
If both of you, if you would like to type in the chat verbiage for those, that way we can make sure we capture that. So, Franco and Aaron, if I could just ask you to just put in the chat
Yep.
your verbiage, thank you.
Slow type
Yep,
or
that's on the way.
Bradley?
Typing as fast as I can.
Not a problem. Slow type away. Easier than trying to transcribe it.
Dr. O'Connor, yours was for the indication section, is that correct?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I received amendment to add in the pharmacological area, medication helps control symptoms of gastrointestinal bleeding by augmenting platelet aggregation, decreasing splenic blood flow, and antagonizing angiogenesis. Another amendment is an indication section is to add upper GI bleed and add refractory hypoglycemia for sulfonylurea overdose. Anything else?
Excellent. The bottom, just for the guidelines containing, it would just be table 3A and 3B.
Yeah, that's on acetylcysteine. It has both of those, and since we added both of them.
Everybody happy with that drug profile and the annulment?
I just added a suggestion for specific wording for the GI bleeding indication to the comments box as well.
Variceal upper gastrointestinal bleeding.
Yep.
All right.
Any other comments? Can you scroll up just to see the very bottom of the page? Just make sure everybody sees that on the recording.
Yes. Then I add
And
3.
so, yeah, so we're adding table 3B at the bottom. Great.
Correct.
I have one question. It lists on the drug profile infusion pump. I don't know that it's reflected in the transport list on a list. Oh, where it's on the list, it should indicate which things are required to be by pump, and on the it's not indicated there, but it is indicated in the drug profile to use an infusion pump. I just wanted to make sure we were reasonable.
Was it?
I don't know if it requires it.
What about the octreotide? The octreotide, so you should be on a pump too.
That's what I was asking. That's what I was asking about. The treatment.
Oh,
Yeah, it typically requires a pump.
Okay. Well, that's reflected on this table 3.
3A and 2B.
Yes.
All right.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll have a vote for approving the drug profile for octreotide with the amended changes made. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Thank you. The motion carries. The next item is to discuss, amend, and approve the draft drug profile for N-acetylcysteine, attachment 5G. May I have a motion?
That's got Brian and Shari.
Thank you.
Sorry, I am nothing with my papers, ignoring the computer.
All right. So again, the first change would be to add capital N hyphen in front of acetylcysteine.
All right.
Wait, can you scroll back up a second? I'm sorry. Yeah, I think to administer within 8 to 10 hours of acetaminophen, I would just say, I would put a time limit. We administer it 50 hours after an acetaminophen overdose because it can still decrease mortality and liver failure related to acetaminophen toxicity. So I would strike the within 8 to 10 hours. I would say it's indicated for the treatment of acetaminophen overdose and toxicity or toxicity.
Just under indication, what do you think about just saying the bullet starts with acetaminophen overdose or toxicity? And just,
Yes.
And just striking the first part?
Yep, I think that's great.
I have a question for Dr. O'Connor and the group. Would it make sense if this is going to be approved, especially for hospital settings? I know N-acetylcysteine has other indications that involve liver protection for other issues, and even sometimes rarely used for patients suffering from nephropathy, other acute liver failures. Would it be best just to kind of broaden the indicators so that we're not painting folks into a corner? And then suddenly we're in a position where, interfacility transports are allowed under one circumstance, but not the other. And yet it's just the same drug getting used.
I think since it's the drug profile, I don't know that we need to specify that. And it would be included under any indication. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. As long as the indicators are not exclusive.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's undifferentiated liver failure, right? Like you don't know, and because acetaminophen is the most
Right.
common cause, and of acetaminophen or of hepatic failure, you cover patients. But to the point made, yeah, it sounds like we can write the indications for educational purposes, but once it's approved, they can use it for whatever they feel necessary or deem necessary. I think the only thing I might do is stipulate that IV N-acetylcysteine is not administered as a mucolytic, right? So you would have to say nebulized for, nebulized for mucolysis, whatever terminology you want to use, but I might differentiate the IV versus the nebulized forms.
Well, it looks like at the bottom left of the screen there, administration categories are included.
I see. Yeah.
And then one quick clarification question because we fit to our octreotide infusion pump, does this also need to be on an infusion pump?
Yeah, I mean, it's typically mixed up in a bag that can go anywhere from, 4 hours to 24 hours, depending on what the protocols that they use. So it has to be on a controlled setting, usually. I mean, the milligrams per hour can vary, or the milliliters per hour can vary, but yeah, it's typically done with a pump.
So we need to fix the tables to add IP to that and then put IV via pump under.
That's just what I want to clarify, because we're adding the IP for infusion pump for octreotide, just clarifying, do we need to add that for N-acetylcysteine as well?
Are also PO versions of N-acetylcysteine as well? It could be given, I mean, I guess it could be given in the like hospital setting potentially, but could be improved as well.
That's the question. So when we put the IP for it, because it can also be given nebulized, is there a differentiation that needs to occur on the actual table if we're putting an IP on it, or? How do
I think
we-
that only it refers to the intravenous form, not inhaled form.
I just didn't know.
Yeah, I think pump only is like the IV infusion.
Right, just, I just didn't know if it should be differentiated, like IP.
On the table it
IV.
does.
Yeah.
On the table.
That's sense. Because it's actually different or IV. Yes, I see, right. I like that.
Your wrapper.
Yeah. Dr. Councilmember, and I think we're probably ready for a vote then, unless there's further comments. We've got a few more items on the agenda.
Dr. Hannon has added to the chat, maybe.
Got it. Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to ask Shelley if she could give us a summary before, a summary of the changes before we vote.
I've added the letter N before the drug name. Under indications, I've removed administered within 8 to 10 hours of, and it's a bullet read if he doesn't offense overdose or toxicity. And then, what else? You want it inhaled / nebulized under administration?
Okay.
I'm capturing all that.
All right. Perfect.
On there. IV via pump.
IV pumps.
Just take
Adding
consistency. Do we want to say maybe nebulized for respiratory conditions, and then in the next tablet, maybe infused or given IV for acetaminophen overdose or toxicity?
In the indication section.
It's not really an indication. I don't think.
I mean, my hope is that we would never be sending somebody nebulized mucomist in a transport vehicle, right? It's not like it's a life-saving treatment necessarily. So.
All right. Then let's go ahead and move this to a vote then, please. All those in favor of approving the drug profile for N-acetylcysteine with the amended changes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries. For the sake of time, I propose that we table for the next meeting the discussion and approval of the draft updates to this committee's bylaws, which is attachment 5H. I please encourage everyone to take a look at that for the next meeting. And then the final item is to discuss ground ambulance rulemaking and next steps, please. Chief Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Castro-Marin. In the interest of time, we want to point folks towards the slide deck that we'll be distributing to everyone. We do have our final slide, slide 28, that gives information on how anybody that has questions about the rulemaking can contact myself. We also have a rulemaking website for folks to get caught up and review drafts. We are going to be posting our next round of revised drafts at the end of July and August for additional comments. And we thank you so much for all your participation and feedback in the process. We really enjoyed making this a collaborative approach. I'll give it back to Dr. Castro-Marin.
Thank you. Any agenda items to be considered for the next meeting, please send those to Shelley. Her address is on the agenda, her email address. And next will be call to the public.
You guys, to pharma rep, I'm gonna go with Jessica J first, please.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Do you have anything to display?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not gonna, since I only have 5 minutes, I'm not gonna display the whole slide deck that I have, since that would take at least like 30 minutes to go through. So I was just gonna give you just a quick rundown on OPVI, if that's okay.
All right.
Okay, awesome.
Please
So,
go ahead.
okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica J. I'm a pharmacist by training, and I am with Indivior's Medical Outcomes and Value Liaison team. Thank you for allowing me to share information and updates on OPVI, which is nalmefene nasal spray. So OPVI is a nasal spray that's 2.7 milligrams of nalmefene in 0.1 milliliters. It is an opioid antagonist indicated for the emergency treatment of known or suspected overdose induced by natural or synthetic opioids in adults and pediatric patients aged 12 years and older, as manifested by respiratory and or central nervous system depression. OPVI nasal spray is intended for immediate administration as emergency therapy in settings where opioids may be present. It should not be a substitute for emergency medical care. And some OPVI warnings and precautions do include the risk of recurrent respiratory and central nervous system depression, limited efficacy with partial agonists or mixed agonists/antagonists, precipitation of severe opioid withdrawal, risk of cardiovascular effects, and risk of opioid overdose from attempts to overcome the blockade. So OPVI nasal spray is for intranasal use only. You do want to seek emergency care immediately after use. Administer a single spray of OPVI nasal spray intranasal into the nose, and then administer additional doses of OPVI nasal spray using a new nasal spray with each dose if the patient does not respond or responds and then relapses into respiratory depression. Additional doses of OPVI nasal spray can be given every 2 to 5 minutes until emergency medical assistance arrives. A 2-part open label study was conducted to demonstrate the non-inferiority of OPVI compared to intranasal naloxone hydrochloride or Narcan on minute ventilation during steady state remifentanil infusion. So we had 61 healthy volunteers with a previous exposure to opioids exposed to a hypercapnic gas mixture containing 7% CO2, which elevated their minute ventilation. Following this 10 minutes of this hypercapnic gas mixture, we did a remifentanil bolus infusion that was administered for 15 minutes. Remifentanil was chosen just because it is an analog of fentanyl and it's quick on and quick off. So we were able to manipulate it just in case anything happened to the patients. Subjects were then dosed with either intranasal naloxone or OPVI. And the hypercapnic gas mixture and remifentanil infusion did continue for 150 minutes with 3 mask holidays. And minute ventilation was measured at 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 15, and 20 minutes post the study drug. The 5-minute time mark that we focused on is what FDA declares as a critical time point to revive a person experiencing an opioid overdose. So following the OPVI administration, the estimated mean increase in minute ventilation was 5.745 liters per minute and 98.9% mean recovery to the pre-remifentanil suppressed minute ventilation at 5 minutes. And then following the intranasal naloxone administration, the estimated mean increase in minute ventilation was 3.011 liters per minute and 80.8% mean recovery to pre-remifentanil suppressed minute ventilation at the 5-minute time point. So with the analysis of the results, it did show that the OPVI demonstrated non-inferiority to intranasal naloxone hydrochloride. We did have some limitations of the study, which included the generalizability of the study to a real-world opioid overdose is unknown. Factors such as the type, the quantity, route administration of the opioids responsible for the overdose, and the interval between overdose and intervention contribute to an individual's prognosis in the real-world setting. So in closing, we do request that you consider the coverage of OPVI as an additional emergency treatment option to help patients of known or suspected overdose. Are there any questions?
Thank you. We have
Thank you
Ken
so much, Ms. J, for that presentation.
Yeah, of course.
We've got Ken Quartermain next.
Is this the appropriate place to stand here?
Underneath the green lighted tile is the microphone.
It's you need now. Be quiet, all right? Don't say. Committee members, my name is Ken Quartermain. I'm representing Medea today. I wanted to thank you all for generally what you're doing. I know it's a labor of love, and you're doing it without being compensated. So thank you for that. I also wanted to thank Dr. Bradley, who was incredibly patient and walked me through this process to which we're new. Shelley, also you were very helpful, and thank you for doing that. I also have Dana Amato here with Medea. He's the Senior Vice President of Global Enterprise. And then on the line is Dr. Desiree Cravacor McPhail, who's the Medical and Scientific Advisor for HICMA Community Health. We're here today for our brief presentation to talk about three things. To introduce you to HICMA and Medea, to talk about HICMA's 8 milligram nasal spray Kloxxado that I'm sure most of you are aware of. And then we have two requests, and we have outlined those requests at the top of the one pager that we supplied you, mainly to add Kloxxado to the standing order from the naloxone administration as an authorized third option for treating opioid overdose, and also requesting that Kloxxado be included on the DHS web page along with Narcan as an additional no-cost option using federal grant funds. We have a couple background items that I included on the one pager. There's also a two pager that talks to you specifically about HICMA and Kloxxado. But a couple things that I just wanted to point out quickly with regard to HICMA. They are a 40-year business out of the UK. They have Arizona operations here, which manufacture Kloxxado domestically. And Medea is an authorized Kloxxado distributor out of California for HICMA. In April 2021, FDA approved Kloxxado nasal spray for emergency treatment of known or suspected opioid overdose. Another point that I wanted to quickly let you know about is that, frankly, the gathering storm of the illicit manufactured synthetic opioids along with higher potencies has led to an examination of the appropriate level and rapidity of naloxone administration. One of the things to point out is there is a lot of current agitation. I'm using that word in a positive sense, specifically over the last several years by the California Department of Corrections and Rehab that looked at the number of overdoses they had between 21 and 22, indicating that 81% of the cases consumed 2 or more units of the 4 milligram naloxone. 55% of the cases relied on 3 or more doses, and more than 20% of the cases used 5 or more doses. In addition to that, Dr. David Strauss, who's the director of the FDA Division of Applied Regulatory Science, in a presentation and a study, questions have emerged as to whether current naloxone dosing is adequate in the era of illicitly manufactured fentanyls. He was looking at both dosage in rapid versus non-rapid administration. And his conclusion, there are several of those, but the one that I just want to point out quickly is that for doses of rapid, totaling 16 milligrams of naloxone did in fact rescue additional patients prior to cardiorespiratory decompensation leading to cardiac arrest. Also, I wanted to mention that within the last several weeks, and based on that agitation that started from corrections, Orange County made a decision, which they announced to be purchasing Kloxxado and using as the starting point for emergency treatment. Dr. Veronica Kelly, who's the Chief of Mental Health and Recovery Services in Orange County, stated that the decision to purchase Kloxxado was an easy one. It is a step toward our goal of education of supplying our community, as well as our workforce with the tools to save lives and protect against increasing fentanyl prices. She was urging all counties and states to likewise make those same purchases. And lastly, I want to just quickly make the point that Clock Auto is not new and it's not a mystery. 14 states are now purchasing Clock Auto. And 38 states, as of the conference call we had this morning, are including Clock Auto on standing orders. That concludes my presentation. We have Dr. Desiree on the phone. If you have any medical questions, she'd be glad to answer those.
Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Any questions
like
for
my-
the, for,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
thank you for that correction in the chat, Dr. That 38 states have gone to purchase Clocks Auto. Any other questions for the team? And then I thank you both presenters for your time and this helpful information. Upcoming events are listed on the agenda and I'll let you guys review those. But for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. The next meeting is November 16th, 2023 at noon. And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Oh, you do, right?
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your attention and participation.